has created the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world. For many people, war is this concept, this distant event happening to people in an imaginary place whose suffering and pain is theirs alone to feel. So I'm sharing my experience covering the war at home in Sudan to reflect the reality of how intimate it is, how personal it is for me and millions of other Sudanese people.
Maybe we do one more interview.
Oh my God, that's my uncle. That's my uncle.
Some of you may have seen this video from the early days in the war, where I found my uncle, who I thought was still trapped in Sudan on an evacuation vessel that we were reporting from. It was a crazy moment. It was completely surreal. I was feeling so many emotions, seeing him, primarily good emotions, relief, gratitude, joy. But there was also a penny drop, because what people didn't know is that my parents were still trapped in Khartoum at the time. And seeing him in flesh and blood was a reminder that they are still in there and still experiencing the horrors that he had just fled. After that moment, we did everything in our power to try and get in, and it was virtually impossible at the time. There were no commercial flights going in. Everyone was leaving Sudan, and we were trying to get in so that I could help my parents leave. We hustled, we barely ate, we barely slept, and eventually we managed to get on one of the first commercial ferries taking people who wanted to go into Sudan, a lot of them for the same reasons as me, to reunite with their family, to be together and to understand what was happening and how to help.
Death will find you anywhere, he says. It's important we're with our families.
We get to Sudan and the first thoughts are how to get my parents out. I convinced them to leave by telling them that I would go to them. And the fear and anxiety my mother had around that thought that I would go where they were terrified and trapped encouraged her to get on a bus that we'd arranged with the help of people around the world who were also really, really keen to help my parents evacuate. They got out and they came to us in Port Sudan. And it was the most insane moment, a moment that I never thought in my life that I would experience.
Oh my God, you look good.
When I first saw my mum and I saw that she still had this glow, she still looked healthy, it was just like, oh my God, okay. Even the journey itself was so difficult. It was a full day through military checkpoints, through militia checkpoints. And at any point through the journey, we thought the worst could happen. And there'd been a lot of accounts of families who'd fled, who'd been attacked on the way. And honestly, it felt like a miracle that they arrived, that they were safe, that they were healthy. And it just was the biggest exhale. Finally, we can now do our job. They're okay. And the first part of their evacuation is complete. My parents are safe. It's time to do my job.
We're in a Sudanese Russian-made Antonov plane heading for Wadi Sayedna military airbase in Omdurman.
We went in with the military and our movement was very restricted. We couldn't go anywhere without an armed escort or strict approval from the army. And that was because the fighting was literally unfolding as we were standing there. It was so haphazard, it was so volatile, that any false move would have killed us.
Even as we're standing here, you can hear the popping sounds in the distance. And as you look back, you see more smoke start to billow out over the city.
There were no front lines. We couldn't actually go to a line of defense. It was everywhere. It was these pockets of urban warfare that were ravaging the city as we were there. And we're being told by the army that it would only last for 3-4 days, that they were going to be victorious. But it was just unfolding very rapidly and very catastrophically with every moment that passed.
They're hunting for bullet holes, an agonizing search for punctured skin.
It was on the edges of Darfur where we were able to see what was happening to people in the line of fire. In a field hospital in eastern Chad, we just saw the wounded streaming in, one after the other, just shot in the hip, in the back, everywhere. It was clear that the attackers had just rained bullets on people.
Now the war in Khartoum has drawn the lines deeper into the sand, and many people who have weathered 2 decades of violence have now come here for a semblance of safety.
We were watching as the largest displacement crisis in the world was building, as people were streaming in from some of the worst hit areas in the conflict. Chad wasn't the only country that was receiving Sudanese refugees. Egypt received hundreds of thousands, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea. People were moving out on a mass scale. Nearly a year after we first went there, we're back in Port Sudan. We end up going to Durman market. We were the first civilians to be allowed in. We went in an armored vehicle. The only other civilians that had gone in before us were volunteers who were sent in to clear the bodies.
This is Souk Durman, one of the most iconic marketplaces in the capital, if not the country. It used to be this bustling sight of people pouring out of storefronts that have been owned for generations. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor, unexploded ordnance. It's just a wasteland. It's unbelievable to think that this is what's left of a place that many people from Sudan remember so fondly.
I've been to Durman market a lot in my life. I've been as a child, I've been as a teenager, and I've been as an adult. Not a single one of those times would I have expected to see it as a battleground and to see it in the state of destruction. All I could really think was that this is what's left. If peace comes, if the war ends, this is what we're left with. Every time I leave Sudan in this last year, I don't know if I'll go back. And when I do go back, I don't know what I'll find. What strikes me as an important lesson is that this is how war works. Everything that you know is gone and replaced with destruction. And if you're lucky, you'll come out with your safety, with the safety of your loved ones, and with some semblance of understanding for other people who are going through the same thing. But there are plenty of people who have lost their lives